This is Xiaomi's Redmi Note 13 5G, a more basic offering from this year's Redmi Note lineup. With budget 5G phones, you can count on some shortcomings to balance out the higher cost of the 5G modem. So what do you actually get here? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Redmi Note 13 5G review. The Redmi Note 13 5G is a phone that aims to provide 5G connectivity along with a solid enough smartphone experience on a budget. It's largely a similar device to last year's Redmi Note 12, but you do get a different chipset and a higher res main cam this time around. The Redmi Note 13 has a flat plastic back panel with a metallic matte finish. There's a rectangular island here for the cameras, and a sharp edge where the back meets the frame, which is also plastic. We found the phone overall quite pleasant to touch, with a nice grip. There is IP54 rated ingress protection here against dust and splashes. That's a slight improvement in waterproofing over last year's IP53. On the front of the phone is a 6.67-inch OLED screen with a 1080p resolution, a 120Hz refresh rate, and Gorilla Glass 5 protection. This display is decent enough, with great contrast thanks to the OLED tech. Unlike other Redmi phones, there is no HDR video support here, but in some markets like Spain, you'll get support for 10-bit color depth. The 120Hz refresh rate smooths out your movements like swiping and scrolling, and it is adaptive, able to switch to 60Hz while idling to save power. The brightness is good here. We measured around 490 nits maximum with a manual slider, and this can boost to nearly 1000 nits in auto mode when exposed to bright light. We did notice that under this light, the ambient light sensor wasn't as reactive as we've seen on other phones. The Redmi Note 13 5G has a headphone jack and just a single speaker, unlike this year's other Redmi Notes. The speaker has very good loudness and Dolby Atmos support, but the sound quality is average, with a focus on vocals and highs. Also, unlike other Redmi models which have an under-display fingerprint reader, this one is side-mounted. It's fast and reliable though. The phone comes with 128 or 256 gigs of UFS 2.2 storage, which is expandable through microSD card. And the interface of the Redmi Note 13 5G is Xiaomi's MIUI 14 on top of Android 13, and is responsive and customizable as ever. All of the Redmi Note 13 models will get an update to HyperOS later on too. We have a dedicated video about MIUI 14 you can check out if you're interested, and we're working on a video for HyperOS as well, which we'll link here when it's ready. The chipset of the Redmi Note 13 5G is a MediaTek Dimensity 6080. This is actually a rebranded Dimensity 810, which comes from back in 2021. In benchmarks, the Note 13 5G is able to hold its own within this price bracket. However, there are competitors with better performance, both when it comes to the CPU and the GPU. In practical terms, the Redmi Note 13 5G runs its interface relatively smoothly, without noticeable stutters, and just the occasional slowdown. There is enough power here to handle daily tasks and even some light gaming. Despite having a large 5000 mAh battery, the Note 13 5G's battery life is quite unimpressive. It scored 9 hours and 49 minutes in our active use tests, the lowest score of the Redmi bunch. Gaming and video playback times were especially lackluster here. Rather than a fast charging solution, you get support for 33-watt charging. The bundled adapter charged the phone from 0 to 50% in half an hour, and a full charge took 76 minutes. Now the cameras. There's a 108-megapixel main cam, an 8-megapixel ultrawide, and a 2-megapixel depth sensor. There's no macro camera here. The main camera is competent during the day. Its 12-megapixel photos have good detail. And despite some sharpening artifacts overall, the grass and foliage look decent up close. You can notice some softness on uniform surfaces. Colors are natural, and contrast could be better. Dynamic range is decent, but unimpressive. If you zoom into 2 times with the main cam, the photos look very soft and over-sharpened. Surprisingly, 3 times zoom shots look much cleaner and sharper than the 2 times ones. While there is no dedicated macro cam, you can use the macro mode to shoot close-ups with the main cam. These are decent enough. In low light, the Redmi Note 13 uses automatic night mode processing. The results are likable, with good exposure and detail. Highlights and light sources look good too. There's a little bit of noise on surfaces, but that's hardly a deal breaker. This phone can't record 4K videos, and 1080p videos from the main cam aren't impressive. Colors look natural, but the dynamic range and contrast leave more to be desired. There's no support for electronic stabilization either. Now we have the ultrawide cam. Its photos are just okay. The colors match well with the main camera, and dynamic range and contrast are decent. But detail is pretty poor, especially if you start zooming in, and everything just looks soft. Low light shots from the ultrawide are soft, with dark shadows and blown out highlights. There's no night mode support on this camera. The ultrawide cam's 1080p video quality isn't great, but it's on par with the sort of footage we've seen from competitors. And selfies from the 16-megapixel front-facing cam are good. They have great detail, good skin textures, and natural colors. So that's the Redmi Note 13 5G. It's a decent mid-ranger overall for the price, with a solid display and chipset, and nice stills from the main and selfie cameras. There are shortcomings though, the lack of stereo speakers, or an under-display fingerprint reader set it behind the other Redmi phones, and the battery life is underwhelming too. All things considered, the Redmi Note 13 5G is not a bad phone in any particular way, but at this price you can find mid-rangers with better value. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're interested in alternatives, you can check out our reviews of the Poco X6 and the Samsung Galaxy A25. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.